Damien.
Damien.
Damien from Ireland.
That's is that the devil's son?
All things project management delivery for development projects. So it's going to be some juicy details in this one.
A development company, the issue I've always found with JVing with a contractor is
£500,000 up to sort of 25 mil, I think, is the biggest one we're doing through planning at the moment.
unless you're like Dorian and come out the womb and go, I reckon this hotel costs about 1,000 a metre to build.
I don't know how I become Irish all of a sudden, so we'll have a chat about that afterwards. But
Roundup sound, ooh, yeah. Real estate deals. We lay them down, let's get those deals. Deals, deals making money, baby.
So welcome back, viewers at home. And in this episode today, we've got a good friend, Alex Hurn, coming on. So Alex works in the delivery side of construction, and we'll intro Alex soon, but you can expect there to be a lot of talk on construction, costs in the market changes, regulations, all things project management, delivery for development projects. So it's going to be some juicy details in this one. So stay tuned, subscribe, and yeah, sweet. Let's get into it. Jack, you're the one with a long-standing relationship with Alex, I believe. So do you want to do a quick intro just about who Alex is, and then Alex, we're going to fire away questions at you.
More than happy to. I will let Alex do most of the intro himself because there's no one that knows your business like yourself. But yeah, I've known Alex since secondary school. We went to a lovely little Greenleaf school in the countryside. Absolute aptitude for sport, but not necessarily intellect, which is why Alex and I probably went there. But I think I've probably known Alex for 13, 14 years. He was actually a year below me at school, although for most of the sort of puberty hitting journey, he was probably a little bit taller than me. But it's been enjoyable watching Alex's journey from studying, obviously building consultancy services, then going working for a company, and then going out and setting up his own, which is now Horde. And it's been enjoyable watching you grow, mate. And I'm excited to get tucked into some details around your area of specialities. But I'll let you crack on and do a bit more of an intro on what Horde do.
Lovely. Morning, chaps. It's great to be here. And Jack, thanks for that glowing intro. I mean, let's not mention the school name, because I think if they started to Google that and see the history of the school recently, it would open up all sorts of cans of worms. But yeah, good to see you all again. Yeah, so I'm Alex Hurn. So as Jack kindly said, I, for my sins, originally trained as a building surveyor. So for those of you maybe in the audience that don't know what a building surveyor does, essentially, it's quite a broad role, and it's kind of probably it's kind of come into its own as an industry in a sort of trade in itself in the last sort of 10 to 15 years, because it's kind of a role in the construction industry which can take you down all different kinds of avenues. You kind of got your really technical building surveyors who are looking at sort of defects and cracks in buildings and acquisition surveys, through to sort of have more asset management work in commercial property, sort of dilapidations, landlord and tenant asset management, all the way through to sort of projects and project management, and sort of more QS, what like you think a QS would typically do. Because I always get introed as a QS, because essentially I am my specific set of skills, as Liam Neeson would say, are more in that wheelhouse. So like Jack said, I mean, I had a very boring route through my early career and just getting trained as a building surveyor. Got chartered, worked at a private practice for 7 years, cutting my teeth on mostly industrial and office property. Started to do a bit more residential work when the PD rights first came in for office to resi conversion, and started to look at sort of our client book at the time that had commercial properties in SIPs, like retail with uppers and small office buildings, looking at potentially converting, and that moved me kind of into that sector a little bit more. And then, as every good entrepreneur thinks they can solve a problem or solve the industry and do it better themselves, I kind of went off to set up Horde just over 5 years ago now, and the rest is history, really. I mean, we are as a business what I deem a multidisciplinary surveying business. So obviously we started as a building surveying business with myself and my business partner at the time. And we've kind of grown 2 additional teams over the past 18 months. A purely focused residential surveying team who are doing pre-acquisition surveys, home buyers, valuations, transactional residential work. And then we have a project management and QS team who do mostly development-led work. So working for guys like yourselves, doing, as you know, delivering schemes mostly in the residential or mixed-use sectors, ranging from sort of £500,000 up to sort of 25 mil, I think is the biggest one we're doing through planning at the moment. So yeah, that's kind of a brief synopsis of where we sit.
Beautiful, mate. Well, I had no idea you guys went back to secondary school. I thought you just knew each other like for a few years before we met you as well, Alex. That's mad. So you're both from Henley?
No, I'm from sort of 20 minutes from Henley.
Yeah. In Oxfordshire, it's if you're in Oxfordshire, it's a massive space. But you kind of Alex lived the other side of the school. I live this side of the school. But he knows Henley.
The cucumber sandwiches, Jack used to help Alex cut his crust off.
He's probably had a fancy coffee in his time, Dorian.
Fancy one. Well, Alex, can we
instant stuff? Yeah.
Alex, can we just dial in a little bit for the benefit of any listeners, just to understand exactly what it is you do and what your type of business does in the space of property development? Could you just give us the high level title of the business and then where you sort of come in? For say a developer's got a site and they want to fund this site, they've bought it, they've taken on that sort of risk side of things, and you come in as a professional practice and just explain that a bit more.
Yeah, sure. So as the business, obviously we are what you deem as a building consultancy. That's kind of the technical definition on the company's house. In terms, we've kind of developed our own, what we call our property life cycle, how we pitch our services. So we really simplify that. The RSS have a very convoluted one, but we have basically 4 steps in the property life cycle. So you have obviously acquire or purchase, develop and construct, occupy and manage, and then you have divest or sell or vacate. And all of our services are built around those 4 steps. Obviously in development, you're really around the first 2. Where we're involved. We don't really get involved in the sales process. That's down to you guys and your sales teams, etc., to push that. But where we really add value is at the first 2 steps. So when you're first looking to acquire, either pre or post planning, cost planning, looking at how things can be built effectively, buildability, feasibility of sites. Once you've kind of got that first initial fag packet appraisal done. I know you guys are much more detailed and diligent than that, but I mean, once you've got that first initial appraisal done, we would obviously be procured to then sort of help you look at the deliverability of it, looking at the cost plan in more detail, looking at the risks and the abnormals of the site and how to manage those through a construction project. And then obviously our services, once you kind of move with the purchase of the site and you're through planning and the construction, the detailed design and the construction programming is beginning to happen, we would usually like to be the lead consultant on that front. So we would like to manage the design team, procure the contractor via tender or negotiated, whatever the route would be, and then manage that acting as employer's agent or contract administrator and project manager through to completion. So we're gone.
No, I was just going to say, just on that point, so when you're engaging with a developer, you want to take on ideally as much control as possible, not in the interests of just getting more work, but actually so that you can manage the process without 2-3 opinions at every different decision.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think where most projects fall down is in the early stages. Not having the right design team. A lot of clients and developers form the wrong design team because they've used an architect on a project before or they've used a consultant on a project before, but this project is completely different. It requires a different set of working knowledge. It might be a refurb, not a new build, and they carry a team across, and there's a lot to say about that, and we like to do that with when we're delivering is carrying a team through projects. But ultimately you need to bring in fresh consultants that can add value to that specific project. And obviously, if we're employed as project manager at EA, the buck is always going to stop with us in terms of time delays or cost delays. So obviously, we like to be able to be in control of our own destiny to a certain extent and have authority over who we're bringing in to work with us. Because essentially you're going to be in the trenches with them for 12, 18, 24 months. And you kind of want to, you want a team that you can trust and rely on through that period.
And you mentioned adding value. So is that the main reason a developer would bring you in? Is it purely to add value, or can it also be just because they want it hands off? They want to just get someone professional in to deal with that. And if you are adding value, could you just play a bit of weight to where are you adding the value in saving costs, in more efficient design, more likely to get planning, things like that?
Yeah, so all of those things really. I mean, not really planning as such. I mean, we would advise make sure that the planning design done by the design team is actually buildable. That's always one key thing. Is like we see a lot. We work with a lot of developers that pick up sites post planning that basically can't be built because they're not compliant or they just don't work. So you have to go then back in for planning, and then that pushes the program out. Obviously, if we're involved with a scheme from early doors, we want to make sure that scheme is buildable and those cost planning is accurate. And really, we always our pitch is that really, if you're paying us 50, 100 grand, whatever it is, to be your PM and your right hand, then we should be finding those costs. We should be paying for ourselves 2-3 times over in the cost efficiencies and time we're going to save you to allow you to obviously deliver the project efficiently and also be able to stack more sites and find more opportunities. So it's an opportunity cost for developers to then be able to scale quicker because they can outsource and trust someone like us to deliver the scheme.
Surely for like the younger development companies, a lot of them are actually instructing you from a risk perspective because you've got the outfit that can manage technical details and skills that they might not have gained yet. And that's obviously what we see in some of the networks that we're part of. But then some firms that are larger and may even have their own internal building consultancy team, why would they be bringing you in? Is it location led, bandwidth led, contacts led?
Network, yeah. Obviously, network's always a key thing. Obviously, we would have a black book, if you like, of people that can consultants and other people that we can bring in. Contractors again, in a contractor network's always important. But I think in terms of bigger developers, really, it's that's where it's more about the time and then being able to trust someone to deliver it, rather than them having to get embroiled in the day to day. Like you say, in terms of the smaller developers, the scaling developers, we've unlocked a few JV opportunities on this basis because developers like that need a CV or need experience of a team that have delivered it to get it past the bank and get the finance agreed. Essentially, they would lean on our development CV under their initial appraisal or pitch deck to the lender, and say we are the DM, the PM to kind of get it through credit. But in terms of the bigger ones, it's more really about again, it's all just about having the experience. Like if people think that you can deliver the scheme and you've got the track record to do it, they're going to want to rely on you to in much of the same way to resource and deliver the scheme effectively.
Yeah. You just touched on something interesting, which again for the listeners, they might go, "What does he mean by JV?" As they'll understand, it's joint venture. But what do you mean? As in, a developer doesn't have the CV, which for anyone listening, if you're trying to go for major bank finance and you've never delivered a scheme of that sort of nature before, then the underwriter is going to go, "Well, there's a lot of risk there, mate, because you've not done this before. So who on your team is providing the conviction for me to lend you that money?" And is that where you're saying you kind of come in and go, "Well, look, we can provide that on the basis that we get an equity split or profit split or something to that nature"?
Yeah, so very very openly, I suppose, is the project that I'm talking about is a £10 million GDV scheme in Surrey. It's 9 units, 3 social, 6 houses. Very sort of copper bottoms, nice area. It's like 950 a foot sales value, so it's quite high end 6 units. But because of the scale and the GDV size and the amount of units, I suppose the developer that brought the site, who we all know from the Developers Club, has only previously done sort of 1 or 2 unit schemes, albeit kind of a couple of £1 million. So for them, like you say, for them to be able to get credit for 6 million, let's say, costs in the finance stack from senior mezz and equity, and get that through the bank, they need to have a team involved that has got delivery experience in doing it to get those credit terms agreed. In terms of the deal we're doing, is we are a third. So we are a third equity in shares of the JV with the developer. So the developer's brought the land, the opportunity. We're bringing the delivery experience, and then we're doing a third also with the contractor who's coming in and delivering at cost. So they're sacrificing their profit for the profit share. We're sacrificing or carrying our fees for our profit share and delivering the scheme, and then the developer is bringing the land and the opportunity and doing a bit of the sort of development management duties as well. But obviously, it helps for him because it's unlocking the scheme, the developer, because it unlocks the scheme for them to be able to deliver it, and obviously it works for us because we get a bit more. We've got skin in the game, and hopefully, if we're much more incentivized to deliver the scheme effectively, because at the end of the day, it unlocks 100% profit for us in terms of what our traditional fee would be.
It's a big like for anyone listening as well. Like, I mean, all of us are involved in JVs to some sort of nature, but when you've got skin in the game, you're much more incentivized to actually deliver. So it's interesting you've gone down that road. I assume you'll look at the business, you'll look at your revenue that's coming in from different parts of the business, and you'll go, yeah, we can afford to do some JVs here and there and carry those costs. The potential upside's good enough to do that. We can maybe make double or something on the profit share. So you kind of adjust that risk, do you? You don't just take on as many JVs as possible, like, say, we maybe would from a developer's side, because you've got a business to run and overheads to cover, haven't you?
Yeah, and obviously we've, like you say, we've got to manage our risk in terms of we've got to look at it like a developer. We've got to look at, do we like this scheme? Do we want to get involved with this developer? Will we work well with them? I think that's a big thing in development that gets underrated, is can you work well with a JV partner, or they're just going to irritate the hell out of you for 12 months because you're going to go through the wars together, aren't you? And there's going to be tricky, difficult situations. But I think essentially my view on the market is I like the view of like the higher end houses where the market is a bit more resilient, where you've got higher sales values, and it's pure houses. I don't really like the outlook for flats, new build flats. I like kind of our strategy in that space is the JV with developers that have got kind of high to medium, high end kind of houses, well designed houses of sort of 10 million GDV and upwards. That's the kind of market I think is going to go and be pretty resilient over the next sort of 4 to 5 years. Yeah.
You mentioned a key point there for listeners is that whilst whilst you're involved in JVs, which is obviously great, you had an existing relationship, which obviously over time you managed to check off your own criteria as to would you want to work with them? Do you think they could deliver anyway? Obviously, people listening, especially those getting into development and new starting off, it might be, correct me if you think I'm wrong, unlikely that they'd be able to get into a JV straight away because they kind of need to earn their stripes, so to speak, prove themselves. I mean, there may be some, depends on the size of the scheme. But what would be your, which I think would be interesting. You obviously, and you and your business deal with new developers and entrants coming into the market all the time. What would you class as your like key pet peeves for those ringing you up, Alex, I need help? And what's the common things that you would want to, you've got a platform a second to say, stop doing this to me. What is it?
Time wasters, basically.
But they don't think they're wasting your time, though. So, well, maybe, but carry on.
Debatable. You get a call I had yesterday, actually. People tell you what they think they can build it for. So they ring you up and they say, I've got this scheme. I think it's going to cost me X to deliver it. Can you deliver it for that? I'm like, well, the build costs will be what the build costs are. You can't tell me what you're going to deliver the scheme for. We'll happily run the appraisal and the cost plan and look to get it VE'd or value engineered or efficient as possible. But you can't just name a cost that you want to deliver the scheme for. The scheme has to go through and has been delivered to building regulations. You have to go through these processes, etc. It will be what it would be. Otherwise, it's just impossible to get to that point. So occasionally you get that. I think other pet peeves. There's always people that meddle a little bit, I think, are ones where they employ you as a PM and a lead consultant, but they like to still try and take on that role as client. And I think that clients, the client role is important, and the client should be educated and be on the journey and have an involvement and do some heavy lifting. But essentially, they've got to accept your advice. Because if they're not accepting your advice or not taking or listening to your advice, then
What's the point of you being there?
exactly.
But that's really good point to it, because like, you know, as a developer starting out, it's kind of like this chicken and egg situation. You don't have any cost data really yourself to understand what the build costs are going to be. You'll pick it up from somewhere, whether it's a course, whether it's a fellow developer, and they'll end up with some form of price per, you know, build cost per square meter, even though it changes whatever your methodology is, your abnormals are, the type of scheme you're building, as you know, you know that better than anybody. So two things really there. One, so you're telling me, Alex, you can't build for £1,000 a square meter anymore, which is a shame, because that's the figure in all my appraisals. No, I'm only joking. And but two, for a developer then, if they obviously will have to do some form of appraisal to understand where they think build costs roughly are going to be before they start incurring costs, so what stage would you say it's fair for them to like kind of bring you in? I know it's early as possible, but they're gonna, if they have a lead on the table and they've never done a development before, they've got a rate from somewhere. So the appraiser's going to say, you know, it's 5 houses, build cost based on this rate is going to be whatever it is, 700 grand. Then would you say at that point is have that conversation with you, but really, especially if they're not done one before, what would you do there? Cost plan, a high level estimate, review their data. What would you do for them?
Yeah, so we always say like a three-step process to how we kind of do the cost planning. So when you're pre-offer and you're looking at a site and like just trying to do the initial appraisal, like guys, if the developer has, like you say, hasn't got that much experience in doing those kind of stuff, we would just look at it and we would give a rate range. So we'd say this will be between 1,500 a meter and 1,800 a meter. Here's 5 points that you need to consider that are unknown and risk items, and you've got to understand that these are risks that could fluctuate and are unknowns, because likely there's ground investigation, there's fire safety, you know, all the things that are yet to be defined or can be defined, and they have a risk profile. And that's probably the difficult bit, is there's no like, you know, as all three of you know, there's no certainty to that cost until you kind of are literally about to sign the JCT contract. There's not even any certainty there. But
No, it's only at the end when you reconcile
Yeah.
what it did cost.
When you're looking
You're
for the
like
money, yeah.
exactly.
And then you realise that you owe the scheme some money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so the first step is basically just giving that high level, like, here's a meterage range, here's like the risks to manage, and here's a rough kind of allocation of cost and contingency based upon those risks. So that's like stage one. That's like pre-offer or offer stage. Once you're post-offer or offer accepted, and you're moving into exchange, we would always say get a cost plan done then. So 1,500 quid, 2.5 grand, whatever it would be, depending on size, we would give you an elemental breakdown of the cost. So we'd actually look at the scheme. We'd take some quants off the plans. We'd actually look at the proposed construction methods, and the finishes, etc. And we'd give you an elemental breakdown. So when I say elemental breakdown, that would be superstructure, so foundations, superstructure, frame, windows, doors, all your elements, including fees and that breakup, and that would give you a cost plan. And we'd usually say that cost plan, and as long as there's no real shockers, well, if you're post-planning, that should be within 5%. If you're pre-planning, that probably is going to be within 10-15%, because there's a bit of risk with the planning.
Is that 5% each way or 5% gross?
Yeah, 5% each way. Yeah, we should always be higher than the QS. As you guys probably know as well, the QS should always be carrying a bit of risk in their price.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be, if the QS is saying it's £2 million build and you're bidding, thinking, oh, we're going to get this to 1.8 at that stage. That it's not.
When you say post planning there, though, Alex, and this may be part of your point 3, are you saying Reba stage 4 or still at Reba stage 3, just post decision? So you've only still got the planning drawings, general drawings, or are you actually saying, though, the 5% fluctuation is really once you've got working drawings and you can price off working drawings?
Once you've got building reg drawings, so once you know what you're building,
fine.
I would say, just touching on the first part where you said pre-offer or pre-bid sort of recce to understand costings, I would sort of always advise that if you are getting a flavour of build costs in your development company, don't reach out to a company like you, because you would end up being that time waster. If you had to cost plan everything that we're bidding on, you wouldn't do anything for anyone else. We're getting out 8 bids a week, and for you to then cost plan the 16 that we've looked out to compile 8 bids, we would need someone permanently working on that. So it is what Alex is saying, is when you get the ball rolling and you don't understand the cost of de-risk your own business, is a good idea, but then put measures in place so that you build rules of thumb across what you're bidding on, so that you don't have to keep going externally to get those bids out, because you may be more active than you want to be, and then they will fall in the category of a time waster, because they've shoved 16 deals through you, they haven't secured one yet, and Alex is going, hang on a second, when you're going to be on site with something, I can't just keep doing, even if you're charging for them, you can't just keep doing, initial deal appraisals from a construction perspective.
And we don't mind. We do a lot of spec work because we appreciate that in the development space, you've got to build those relationships with developers, and they want a bit of blood, sweat, and tears for that. But we would always spend half an hour, just look at the plans. You're going to be here. This is what we're building. 2 hours or an hour away down the road, we're building it roughly this. You've got concerns. Your levels are a bit different. Your drainage, there's a drainage issue potentially of your site, so I'd allow that. It's quite a quick exercise. But yeah, I agree, Jack, that the full cost plan exercise, until you're nailed on going to get that site, there's no point in using us to do that.
And that's the chicken and egg of being a developer, though, isn't it? You can only take, if you're going into a site, and again, for the benefit of the listener, if you're going into a site and you don't have that domain knowledge up front, then that's just sort of evidence that that site's probably not right for you. If it's too far out of reach where you need an Alex to even help you bid on it, then it's probably not the right site for you, right? That's why you need to work your way up the site pyramid. Otherwise, you can end up taking a huge risk. Maybe you're right, and then you employ Alex, and you're like, oh, actually, yeah, your build costs were pretty on point, and people get lucky in that sense, but it's not repeatable.
Unless you're like Dorian and come out the womb and go, I reckon this hotel costs about 1,000 a metre to build.
I don't know how I become Irish all of a sudden, so we'll have a chat about that afterwards. But no,
that's a compliment, mate.
Fuck off!
It's an upgrade.
What I was going to say, no, the other key thing is, even for experienced developers as well, every job that we've done where we've used a new methodology to us, it's always cost us significantly more than we expected, even when I have team members experienced in that methodology. It's just when the business itself runs a new methodology, like if all you've been building is masonry or timber frame, and then you go into light gauge steel or concrete frame, it's what, as you know, Alex, again, better than us all, you could be the same meter square in terms of the area of the build, but the price difference it can be astronomically different. And that's one key thing I'd say. Even if you're an experienced developer, you get through the first stage, you're actually more prone to make a mistake when you go into a different methodology, because you think you can build, but actually you've missed a fundamental.
So I would say that's completely right, but predominantly in new build. If you're like us and most of your stuff is conversion, your contractors normally doing something that they've done before. We might have 2 conversions. One's very similar to the other, but there's different skills or different techniques that they're using on the building. Whether it's one's got stud partitions and they don't need to internally insulate the building, and the other is already thermally there and they're using track, and they've got more structural changes. You're pushing that liability to some degree on the contractor, which is why we internally get a bid together, bid on the site, get the site secured, and then we'll spend the time speaking to contractors who can actually deliver the site, and start talking values with them, because then it's always valuable.
Will you do that before you complete them? Because I know conversions.
Yeah,
I
for
was
sure.
talking about new build, but conversions can be quite tricky. As you said, you can have a building where it's mainly internal reconfiguration. You can have another building same size, but it's all structural alterations. And now you're talking way different in terms of costing. But I know firsthand, and we all know, the people who have secured sites and bought them based on the reconfiguration value. And actually, then when it comes to the actual delivery, the costs are way higher than expected.
Yeah, we've normally got building reg drawings even before completion, and are
Right.
starting to think about those conversations of cost before we complete. In quite a lot of instances, we might even have that done pre-exchange.
Is that because these are PD schemes that you're able to do that? Because obviously, as a
Yeah,
developer, mainly in new build, and in Wales, there's no PD, so we'd have to invest in that, and it's quite expensive to go through all of those drawings before completing. Or do
yeah,
you,
we've got a little bit of a benefit of
You got a bed
two
as
other
well, don't it?
businesses, two other businesses that are alongside our company, so we can be very lean at the point of carrying risk.
That's such a good point, though. I don't, this podcast is about Alex, but it's just that this is an interesting point, though, about Jack's advantage as a developer by having Ben and Aparo, and obviously your existing knowledge on design. That's a huge strategic advantage to buying sites. So,
Aura?
Aura,
Aura,
sorry,
yeah,
Aura. Wait,
yeah,
who
yeah.
the fuck's Aparo? I don't know why I said Aparo. I don't know who that is.
That's my social housing
Oh, that's it.
business.
That's it.
That's another
Yeah, that one's not worth a mention.
At least it's your business. But that is a huge advantage because if there's a site and there's two developers, you and one other, going to bid on that site, and it's the same for Alex, I suppose, on the cost side of things. It's a huge advantage having that domain knowledge and being able to do upfront work at cost and not needing to employ an architect and then you spend 30, 50 grand on regs drawings that are then a waste of money. So
Yeah, we've actually got a site at the moment. I mentioned it a couple of episodes ago. We're buying a bank in Oxfordshire. Quite a big bank. It will probably end up being a retail unit and maybe like 7 or 8 flats. Some of those flats will be HMOs. And we're due to exchange in December, and we're already drawing it.
yeah, banging.
Yeah, because then on the flip side, we've got sites now that we're working on. We've been working on for a while. We've got a legal position. Obviously, we're taking through plan and stuff like that. But the ones that there's a few sites that we have that we're due to like sell in Q1 next year. But there's still like this level of risk where if we trigger the working drawings package, it's like multi 5-figure investment effectively just
Mm.
that you're committing to, and that risk of fall through becomes the sunk cost potential becomes quite high. But
Yeah.
back to Alex though, which is obviously the key
Hi,
thing.
Alex.
Oh, you didn't finish point
Is your
3,
mic
Alex.
still working?
Pre-offer. Yeah,
I think so.
pre-offer,
Think so.
offer accepted, and what's the next one?
And then, as you know, that's kind of into what you guys would do internally. Is we would then when your kind of stage 4 is complete, that's when you should have a full takeoff and bill of quants done. So that's a working bill of quants that you can go out to that as a main contractor can use to go out to subcontractors and package up prices to give price certainty. That's kind of stage 3, and then that's kind of the 3 cost planning stages to pre-construction.
And what's
Yeah.
the from and again, sort of, if you want to carry on with the the state like appraisal stage, please do. I'm just curious from following on from that. Let's assume that you've been working now with a developer and you've helped them with pre-offer, you've helped them with the cost plan exercise. So they're building the appraisal, which at stage they'll be going through probably development finance or starting that process as well. And then as they've progressed, you've helped them then with the full bill, full procurement. Then what are you seeing as the standard forms of contracts and method of procurement for newish developers, or what would you recommend for the first rodeo, so to speak?
For newish developers, I mean, it's probably the hardest one because you're probably looking at schemes which aren't huge, and you're probably using contractors which are quite lean and don't have design teams or that many contacts in that space. So where we do struggle sometimes with the smaller newer developers is that we advise to wrap into a D&B contract, but the builders that they're having to use that are small or relatively kind of domestic don't have the kind of knowledge or expertise to carry out a D&B, a design and build contract. And it's just a quick one. Design and build contract essentially is when you procure, when the contractor becomes responsible for the design and the build. So they will procure the design team within their costs and then deliver the construction. That's the bank's favorite kind of procurement because everything is wrapped up in one party that's liable, and it's quite very, very nice and easy, and it segments the risk quite nicely. But like I said, the issue you have is that a lot of builders at that size don't can't operate at D&B. So then you're probably in a position where you're still going to have to use a D&B contract, but you're probably going to have to take the design a bit further forward as developer, and spend a little bit more money on the design team before getting into contract to help the contractor. So you're going to have to probably take it to, like we're talking stage 4, stage 5. You're probably going to take it to stage 4.5. So you're going to have a buildable scheme where the risks are minimal, and then novate. So the design team then go on board with the contractor, and the contractor's then responsible for coordinating them from the point of the contract being agreed.
But
that's kind of
correct me if I'm wrong, Alex. Just whilst you're on that point of D&B, that even if the contractor, has maybe not had that great deal of experience before, but you want to appoint them on this particular site, they can still use appointment letters and cross-lateral warranties, can't they, with design practices like M&E and things like that to secure their position from an insurance standpoint.
Yeah, but then they have exactly that, and then but the contract has to take out PI, and
Sure.
if they don't have anyone in house, if it's a contractor where they're very, very lean, they won't have anyone to be the design manager or the contracts manager that's got
You
that
could have
kind
a
of
principal
experience
designer,
leading.
couldn't you, from an architectural practice to lead that?
Yeah.
So there
but
are
I
ways
think,
to puzzle it in, isn't there? But it can get a bit messy. You kind of just want a contractor who's got full competency in house, but you can get around
yeah,
it.
exactly. And I think on that point, I think that is a really good strategy for new developers, or is JVing with a contractor. I think that's a really good way of unlocking deals to start with, because you've got you're almost you're getting them into bed with the contractor. Means they're going to, again, like I was saying with our JV position, is they're going to be more incentivized to deliver profitably and effectively, and it kind of gives you that leg up, and they're probably going to have a bit of cash maybe,
but it's
to throw into the deal.
Relationship's so important, though, isn't it? That getting into bed with a contractor, period, whether it's a JCT contractor or a JV. If you really want to, we know a few developers who do this, and I always think like there's a risk you take on if you don't really know them that well.
Yeah. So coincidentally, I JV with contractors now, but that was after like 15 projects. So I've done it the opposite way around. The more I've worked with them, the more open I am. But that's just with central suites when we're doing individual houses. I don't necessarily do that so much with a development company. The issue I've always found with JVing with a contractor is if they say they're going to build at cost, the bank won't lend or do the deal on the fact that it's being done at cost, because if anything happens to that contractor, no one can replace that value of rebuild.
Yeah.
So the bank will always want to see it built out of value. And yeah, granted, you could probably draw less of the finance down, but you still need the same cash equity at the beginning, whether they're building at cost or not. And the hardest part for me to plug in any deal was the equity. So I would rather, if I've got to keep some slice of the pie for the investor, I'd rather give them more, because then it makes it easier to get the deal done.
A profit share is probably more sensible, isn't it, with a contractor, if your exit is to sell. If you're retaining it, again, I just wouldn't do that with a contractor.
Yeah.
But
Alex, I'd be keen to see how your funding works on the Surrey deal.
Yeah, so we're just going through the credit at the moment with our preferred senior mezz lender, but essentially the pitch we've given to the bank is that obviously we're JVing with the contractor and us and the developer. Like you say, that we've appraised it at the developer delivering at cost, sacrificing their profit. The backup to delivery, if something happened to the contractor, or if they went bust and they couldn't deliver at that cost, we would step in as CM and deliver it and procure the trade packages directly, and we would probably still be able to deliver it for that target cost, because there'd be no overheads or prelims.
Would your slice of the pie go up to 66% when you step in to do that? You want to get that in your contract?
Hopefully.
Can I ask just two more questions about your business, Alex? Purely because this podcast is about property and business. It's about business in the property space. And it's unique to have you on from the consultancy side of things to understand sort of how your business works. So at the moment, what's the size of the business, in terms of management teams and surveyors? And then also, can you just sort of touch on what are the bottlenecks of running and scaling that type of business? Because you're at the coalface of all the bullshit parts of delivery, right? Like you're having to deal with the hard stuff, and your clients, you're having to deal with all the hard conversations with them as well. So just, explain a little bit more about how you try and scale this sort of business and what it looks like now.
Yeah, no. So we've been go 5 and a bit years now, and we're obviously starting from a fresh. We're probably going to do about just under 2.5 million revenue this year. So we've kind of grown. The first 3 years we grew reasonably quickly, kind of doubled in size every year, and then the market's been a bit harder the last 2 years, let's say, in the
Understating it, yeah.
construction industry.
Yeah.
But we've still managed to grow, albeit not as profitably, because we've had to build those structures in the business. We are a team of 20, I think 24 as of 1st of December, and almost equally split across the three teams of resi surveying, building surveying, and projects and QS. And then above that, we have 2 directors, technical service director David and Chloe, operational surveying director, and then me leading or trying to lead. Essentially, we have quite a flat structure, and that's kind of how I want to keep it, because I think that's where you get quite heavy when you're trying to scale, as you build layers in to the team, where you kind of get that middle manager mentality. Whereas we kind of we've had our fingers burnt. I mean, I would love to employ more grads and apprentices, and maybe that's something to come back to, but I've employed a few over the years, and I've always had my fingers burnt, because we're quite an autonomous team. So we're very flexible on office time. We're very trusting in terms of that, and everyone kind of comes in, does their fees, and is trusted to get on with their work in their own time. We don't micromanage, because our surveyors are generally quite senior, sort of 7-8 years plus. So we can have that structure. But when we're trying to bring in a more graduate or apprentice-led team, that's going to be hard, because of the format. So that recruitment strategy has allowed us to grow quite quickly, and I think that's something we're going to have to keep pushing probably for the next 12 months, and then probably look to build a lower layer in below to really push the growth. But I mean, the challenge is, what are the key challenges? Cash is always a challenge. I mean, even for a services business, for us at the moment, cash and debtors is always a challenge. Working with developers, you guys don't bloody pay on time, never pay on time.
What would you say your debtor days
I've got no money. I'm waiting for my drawdown. Can you wait 30 more days? Yeah, no, I won't pay my team, mate. Don't worry.
Yeah, we've all been there.
What would you say your debtor days are on average, Alex?
31 at the moment.
Okay.
Is that what you invoice to, or is that exactly the time span of services to payment?
So that's invoice date to payment on average across the business.
Yeah.
We are invoiced. Our payment terms are 14 days.
Yeah.
Some of our survey where the business model is quite saving grace for us. Our residential surveying arm, which will turn about £500,000 this year, that's cash positive. So that's paid before we do the service.
You paid up
so
front.
So we've always got 40-50 grand a month coming through, like drip feeding in. So that's quite nice to pay the overheads, and then that allows us to do the bigger, lumpier stuff with developers, people that don't pay. And manage and average that out. But obviously, majority of the bigger stuff is probably much more than 30 days.
And in terms of scaling, Alex, so we talk about this a bit on the podcast. We want to go national. We want to take on the fucking world. But like in your sort of business, and it's the same with us as developers. There's breadth, and then there's vertical growth as well. So are you looking for trying to build a practice with multiple offices nationally, or are you trying to build a practice where you can really control a condensed unit of senior heads, maybe 30 to 50 senior heads, but you're doing bigger, more specialist projects? Therefore, your revenue per overhead is going to be higher. Is that the natural trajectory for your type of business?
We want to move to a national business. We want a North office in the next 12 months. In terms of what we're looking at the moment, and we're going to implement from our next financial year, May next year, so we're moving to a group structure. So we're separating out, obviously with the development stuff, we've got the DevCo. We've then splitting out our residential and commercial businesses, because our residential business is completely different operational management processes. System is completely different. It's transactional, whereas our commercial business is completely opposite. And in all honesty, if we were ever to exit, the purchaser of the resi business would be completely different to purchaser of the commercial business. So that needs to be separated, running its own P&L, running its own team.
Not
so we're moving into that.
flow, not supporting the cash flow anymore from the commercial business.
They'll
That's
still be
a
doing
fun
that
12 months.
just through the group structure.
Yeah.
The group structure, mate. That's the benefit. So that's kind of where we're moving to at the moment, and then I think that will give me, because I want to. What I've realised over the last 12 months, obviously, I started the business with a business partner. I brought them out after 2 years because I wanted. He was much older than me. I worked with him for 8 years. Trusted him with my life, but we had different views as the business was growing, and I wanted to keep growing. He wanted to kind of take it easy. If you not take it easy in terms of, but take it easy. Yeah, take it easy in terms of growth. But now I kind of having 2.5 years on my own, I kind of want more people in with me now because it's getting a bit. I just want more people around the table with me. So I think having that new structure of that group structure will allow me to bring people in with equity and share options into the companies. Again, coming back to the point of national and other regions, it would allow us to bolt in M&A. So if we wanted to buy smaller firms, which we're talking to, and I think that's a relevant growth strategy for us at the moment, is buying smaller vendor-owned businesses that are old retired surveyors that have got £500,000 million quid business that they don't have an exit. Their exit is to come into a bigger group and run their own company with a bit of support for couple of years before they exit. So that kind of structure will allow us to start new regions and obviously bolster in new service lines. So that's kind of my route for growth at the moment. So it changes with the wind, mate.
So we all do, mate, especially in the markets we've seen over the last few years. But the residential arm, just for clarity for the for the listeners' sake, residential arm is more your kind of domestic surveys and things like that, isn't it? Like going in, doing a building survey, quick, easy stuff where you might be charging like £1,000, £2,000 or something like that. So those packages are predictable. Right. And those things you can scale out. But you can scale those nicely. It's then a question of, processes, management teams, things like that. But the commercial side, do you have an appetite for wanting to just be on as many sites as possible? Or is there like a pyramid that you're trying to climb, much like a developer, where you just want to get to bigger sites, but not necessarily more sites?
I think the value for us would be better doing more sites rather than the big value sites.
Interesting.
How big? Obviously, we'd like to be involved with bigger stuff, but that comes with risk as well. Where a lot of professional services companies like the Ridges of this world and the bigger consultancy businesses that you probably would have heard of, they all target getting on frameworks, like government-led frameworks, and that underwrites their wage bills. So like Mace, Ridge, they kind of own and dominate those framework areas. So they'll be on the frameworks with housing associations, councils, and they'll know they'll have 2 million, 3 million quid worth of work through that over 5 years, and that will underwrite them. They don't like fishing in the smaller ponds for the private work and having to do much granular lead gen. They're still very traditional in the sense of the frameworks and then networking. Where we grow that and where we kind of specialize in the growth in the commercial sector is digital marketing as well as networking and a bit of disruptive networking. And that's kind of where I think the more client book you have, our weakness at the moment is not being able to sweat that client book. So we're very good at lead gen, very good at getting clients in, very good at doing a good job, but we don't have that process to turn those 10, 15 grand clients into 100 grand clients when they should be. So that's what we're building onto that, because I think we don't really need too much client acquisition. It's more client value in that business, whereas the resi business is a pure lead gen business. That is just probably 50% leads from organic and digital, 50% leads from partnerships with solicitors, estate agents, and that's just getting 150 leads a month, convert half of them, do a good service, and just keep going. Much probably similar to your XP Surveys business, Jack, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, ours is split in two different natures, and we actually focus more on commercial. My camera's back. So I would have probably said 95% of our business is from architects and developers, and we like that work because it's routine. If we do a survey with an architect, there's scope to do 8 a month if you really get up to, if they are delivering that much. Whereas we do get SEO clicks. Someone Googles surveyor in Oxfordshire, and then we get a click and it's direct to consumer. We actually have a coding system internally so that we know how to manage that lead within our portfolio of the work that we need to deliver, which no one would be able to sort of acknowledge or see externally. But if an architect sends us a job, we're going to prioritise that work. So yeah, we focus more on B2B, which is kind of your commercial side. And then we do obviously have leads come in B2C, but we actually drive as much. It's still the same result. It's still doing a measure survey for that end consumer. But when it comes via the architect, we're not doing all the legwork for that cost per acquisition. And that client value is, tens of £1,000 a year rather than it being 800 quid for Aunt Betty who moves every 14 years. So yeah, it's very, very similar. But we actually do very small percentage direct to consumer.
And Alex, before we move on to the market data, which will be a juicy part of the conversation as well, just anything else to add? Just thinking about anyone listening to this, there's so many different kind of professionals that you use as a developer, from solicitors to building surveyors to design practices, specialist surveyors, and all this kind of stuff. So it's just interesting for us to try and sort of dig into what it is your type of business does. We've covered a lot of ground here, but is anything else you think worth it for the viewer to know about the kind of stuff you're dealing with? Obviously, you're at the coalface. Regs have changed as well, so you've had to do some retraining internally, I assume, to keep up to date with that.
I have a couple of questions as well once you've done that, before we move on to the market data.
Cool.
I've got one as well.
You can ask me. Jesus.
How did you get your hair like that?
In terms of the big movement in the market generally, and the concern and thing to watch out for is the Building Safety Act at the moment. That's kind of where people are tripping up on themselves, and it's still much a very unknown quantity in terms of what that's going to do to your project costs and timeline. It's almost very unpredictable depending on availability of the building safety regulator. But just to summarize that without getting into boring everyone to sleep, essentially the Building Safety Act is the new fire regulation or building control process that's come out the back of obviously what happened with Grenfell. And it basically means that anything over any scheme that requires building regulation application has to comply with the Building Safety Act. So any scheme has to appoint a principal designer under both CDM and Building Safety Act. That's important for all developers to know. The main, when you're delivering a scheme which is over 18 meters or 6 stories, that becomes known as a high risk building, and then you need to go through what's called the gateways. This is 3 gateways, and that essentially means you have to appoint the building safety regulator to basically be the building control body for that project. And that means you have to go through Gateway 2, which is before you can start on any construction site. You have to submit all of your fire design, fire safety, building regulation design, whole package to the building safety regulator to sign that off before you start on site. And that's usually a 12-week period, targeted.
Targeted, yeah.
And then exactly. And then Gateway 3 is before the building can be occupied. At the end, again, you have to apply to building safety regulator for completion, and they have to come and check that you've kind of built as per all your plans and designs. And again, it's a 12-week period. So there's a 6 months implication there if everything goes to plan around in terms of getting stuff signed off and on the market. I mean, arguably at the back end, it's before it can be occupied, so you can get stuff if you're selling or letting and get it on the market during that period. But the Gateway 2, which is before you start on site, that has the most implications, because you have to get to a point where there's going to be no design changes to any fire safety regulated matters once Gateway 2 is signed off. So you have to basically be in bed with a contractor or be appointed a contractor at that point, because they need to have input on how the stuff's going to be designed and constructed. Mm-hmm. So you're having to get into and that pool of contractors which are insured under PI and can work on high risk buildings is very limited. So it limits the availability in that high risk building space as to who can deliver these schemes, and that's having a cost implication in itself because the market is so limited.
So you're having to, as a business, you're having to continuously keep retraining, aren't you, and keep up to date with reg changes.
Yeah,
Part of the task.
and it's and I think in terms of our team and the training, I mean, we always push everyone to go through their chartership as soon as possible. In the building surveying world, there's about 12 different service lines. I'm not going to bore you with all of them, but essentially there are about 12 different what we call products that we can sell. And to keep up to date with all the regulations, the case law, party wall case law, dilapidations case law, all of that kind of stuff, which is ever moving, is tricky, and it's and it's ever evolving. Yeah,
Fascinating.
we need Elon Musk over here, mate, to deregulate. That's what we need.
Is that what you think? Like high level, do you think we're overregulated now in the building space?
100%. Nothing. If then we deregulate a lot of the loop things we have to jump through: planning, building regs, all of the other legislation. 50% of deals that come our way would be more buildable and would work from a development stack.
Yeah,
I reckon at least 50%.
There's a rabbit hole there to
cost.
Yeah, I mean, there's a rabbit hole there that we could dive down, but we won't today. Not on
I
this
think we were
podcast.
talking about it. I think we were talking about it last episode. The amount of rigmarole that you've got to go around to fucking convert a loft nowadays and reconvert everything below it because of fire regulation, and they're throwing up 50, 70-story skyscrapers on sand in Dubai, and they seem to be cracking on with it a lot more efficiently than we are. But
it's an ossification of the building sector, and they wonder why we're not delivering houses. But we've done this too many times in this podcast, so not today. But I think there'll be another good episode to bring Alex back on to dig into regs specifically, because it will be useful for people. But Dee and Jack, you got questions, and then we should probably go to market data.
Do you want to go first, Dee?
I've only just got one thing really. It was just to kind of recap, just for those listening, getting into development or early stage developers, about kind of the QS and commercial functions. So the way I see it is like five key areas for which you've already talked about: estimating and procurement side. So you have just 3 steps for estimating. You talked about procurement. And then for what I've always seen a difference between okay firms and really good firms where they add that value you was talking about, Alex, is stage 3, which is negotiation. It's negotiate that is a huge commercial within building. That you can literally through savvy negotiation and terms, you can add back in 1, 2, 3%, maybe more, but at least that in terms of overall from the GDV back to the bottom line. So, but it's so easy for that to kind of get missed, and then stage 4, well, not stage, but is the ongoing financial management of the commercial management of the development, which, as you've said, can last for up to like 24 months. Is that? And I was going to ask, do you work with developers on that as well? Do you get involved and help them with the internal vals, the CVRs, so cost value reconciliations, the cash flows, looking at the forecast to complete versus how much they've got left on their drawdown facility to see if they're going to be in a cash deficit, which is very, very common in development. One of the most common things you'll see with developers is they'll bring in a development finance facility, they raise the equity, but they've only raised the equity they need for the difference. But the problem you see in development is there's so many costs that won't be funded in advance. You have to pay it first, then get it funded back, or then actually are excluded in the development finance facility, and straight away they set themselves up for a cash negative position. So my question really, and then the final point in terms of commercial management, is dispute resolution. So my questions to you really was:
is that a question?
have you seen, from what I've said there, does any of that ring true? And do you potentially have any key tips for those listening on those points, or any just your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, because we are because we do bank monitoring as well, so we have surveyors that do development monitoring for doing the bank QS role. So we kind of sit outside of the fence as well. So when we do that role, like you say, Dorian, being the project QS or the cost manager for the developer or contractor, we can be quite smart, let's say, with how we show things to the bank, because we know where the bank are going to pull up. I.e., we've had one recently where I won't name the lender or the developer, but essentially the drawdown request went in from the developer. The bank turned around and go, we're actually only going to draw down 30% of your professional fees
Wasn't
until
us, was it?
you're no, but you're right.
Sounds familiar.
Until you're significantly through the project, which, I mean, as we all know, professional fees, you're probably 60-70% into your professional fees budget
Yeah.
before you're even in contract.
We've
So
actually had some projects where they won't do it for professional fees at all. They won't even return professional.
see,
And I'm like,
that's
but
major.
it's part of the value add. So I get it. You know, banks don't like funding things at dead costs, which decrease the value of the asset, like stamp duty. You don't get that back when you've finished it, but putting a new roof on, you might get the value back on it. But yeah, we've seen them just flat out go, we're not covering professional fees. We've got a scheme at the moment, and they won't cover it.
But yeah, so I think just come back to your point, let's call you Damien then, Dorian.
Damien from Ireland.
That's is that the devil's son, Damien? Yeah.
Go on.
Just coming back to your point on the cost management. Yeah, I think we do get involved at that granular level, and I think that cash flowing piece is very commonly overlooked by developers on that are starting out, and like you say, that is crucial, because essentially, if you get to a point where a lot of lenders as well don't like to draw down too much money before you're watertight. So there's the cost management element, but there's also the program management and being able to look at the program and delivery program and making sure that you're accelerating certain elements so you can get certain amounts of cash release as quickly as possible. So if you can program to get watertight as soon as possible and accelerate that over sort of some internal items or other areas, you're going to get 75-80% of your draw of your cash release with some lenders. So there's little things like that are value add that some developers wouldn't actually always think about.
Yeah,
got you. Jack, what's your question, mate?
Yeah, so I was actually going to quickly make a point to touch on kind of Dorian's point of the value being created, and this is for developers out there that are thinking, at what point could we use like someone like Alex and engage with someone like Alex? We actually have capabilities in our business to do bill of quants and do project management, but sometimes when we're in a joint venture structure with an investor, it's more logical for us to bring in a third party because we're actually sharing that cost. So sometimes in joint venture structures, the investor isn't willing to pay you your fees to deliver a scheme if you're also on a 50% shareholding. So in those particular JV scenarios, it actually saves you time and resource and capital to bring in a third party to manage that project or do a bill of quants for that project. Even though it feels like you're outsourcing something and it feels more expensive, it actually sometimes works out better. But my question for you, Alex, Ryan sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I want you to forget about property, the vehicle, and I want you to think purely about the business, because obviously you've grown, a £2.5 million turnover business in 5 years, which is commendable. Why have you grown in that market? What have you had to do? What does it take to be that sort of founder and CEO of the business? And what real challenges have you faced that you've had to overcome, just specifically about the business, not necessarily the product?
Our biggest barrier to growth is and always will be recruitment of talent. The talent pool in our industry is far too small. It's far too competitive, and there's minimal barriers to entry for people to start surveying firms. So you could go tomorrow and say, "Oh, I'm starting up JJ building surveying or project management. Here I go. Off I go to races. Some money in marketing. I can start delivering schemes." Yeah. You don't have to be an RICS regulated business. You can still operate without that. So that has led to the rise of a lot of one-man, two-man bands in the industry. And I've lost some really good people over the last 12, 18 months that have gone and started their own surveying business. And when you're being pinched at that end of the pinch at that end of the talent pool, and then also there's not enough talent coming in, and you've got a lot of the bigger competitors that are paying more, have got better benefits packages, and that positioning of being that SME is quite tricky in an educated industry.
Yeah,
So
I
retention
actually, just to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole on that, I always say to our surveying team, we need to be making 4x your salary. And I always think every time that I say it, it's good because they understand what they need to be earning, but also they're thinking, okay, now if I left and just charged half without the overheads, I completely agree. But then actually, they actually realise the amount of admin and fluctuation of work that goes into this industry is actually not very attractive at all, because you'd be shitting yourself if you've got a big mortgage Christmas coming up with a family
and dealing with clients as well.
no surveys come in.
Yeah, and finding clients to
admin,
sales and
but yeah, sorry, carry on.
So I think that's our biggest challenge, and will continue to be our biggest challenge.
Have you got an in-house recruiter now?
We've just taken someone on in the last 3-4 months. Or is it 6 months now? Anyway, recently we had someone before, didn't work out, but we've got Andrew in now, who is very, very good. The purpose of that is that we need to take on, for our, let's say, 8 people a year, to keep growing, on the basis of we need to probably take on 5 or 6 people across the business, and then you get the churn of losing 2 or 3 a year. So you're probably looking at 8 to 9 people a year you have to get in the door. That's almost, and then you're interviewing. Obviously, you have to outreach, interview. It's almost like a marketing campaign itself, a sales campaign, recruiting people, and that's how we look at it now. So the recruitment costs and the fees that we would get in charged, like 15% per new person, let's say an average salary of 50 to 70 grand, is it adds up a lot as cash flow risk to your business. So the view of bringing someone in-house that can tell the story, is much more engaged, is brought into the why and the brand, their conversion rate, we find with having internal recruitment is much higher than using external consultants. External consultants still have a position, and I'm very close with a couple of recruitment companies for senior roles. They're still very useful, but for most of that has helped, and that will continue to help us get the best talent.
I suppose there will be some sort of critical mass to your type of business, right, where it pays more weight to have really good internal trainers who can gen up those post grads and those like those summer fucking internships and things like that, where you can then recruit a talent pool, but you have to then foster them for 3 years or so until they're at least volume. Yeah, so you need volume. So do you have any idea what sort of size you have to be at to be able to justify that? So you're genning up maybe 5-6 new recruits each year. Generally, it should have more loyalty long term.
Yeah, well, I mean, coming back to Jack's point of how you look at your gross profit and how you're looking at what return you need from your fee earners, you probably need one, like you say, Ryan. You need the people in the business that can buy into and want to deliver, spend time with a sort of upskilling the next generation. But then you also probably need enough gross profit in your current fee earner capacity to stomach the training cost and the lower return, the 2x or the 1.5x you're going to get on a graduate for that 3 or 4 years. So you're probably looking at a ratio of 5 to 1, I would say. Yeah. So you need probably 5 good fee earners to 1 apprentice or grad.
Yeah.
It's also difficult because what actually happens is the fee earners that were bringing in business and sitting in your sort of cost of sale gross profit margin, they turn into management. So no one's a fucking fee earner because someone's coming in and not doing anything because they don't know how to do it, and then someone else is then training them. So I think to really make that really successful, it probably needs to be an 8-figure business. I mean, I'm speaking from our surveying business. You've got to have real size to actually warrant sort of incubating people to skill them up internally, and it just is more cost effective just to bring in a fee earner.
Yeah,
I agree, and I think the other thing as well, like you made a good point there, is that the traditional consultancy model is your best surveyors or the most experienced surveyors become managers, become associates, start having to manage the team, and then becoming directors, and then have to win business. Those people might not be the best people at doing that. They might be your best surveyors. So why take them away from delivering the work into doing business support activities when all they want to do is deliver the work, and that's where you're going to get best return or best output from them. And I think that where that's, again, coming back to our business model, is that where we employ reasonably senior people and don't have that underbelly, we allow the surveyors just to literally enjoy doing what they do, fee earning.
Yeah. Well, I would also say one trap to be careful of for business owners out there is sometimes you'll be very content with what Alex is saying and have a fee earner in their realm doing well, generating good value for the business, and they have an ego complex that they need to be managers. And at that point, you really need to assess whether one, they could be a good manager, two, whether the business actually needs it, and three, sort of peter that down there and then, because we've seen it across the board where someone goes, I want this in my role, I want to progress and do this and manage people, but sometimes they're not. Like Alex said, they might not be a good manager, and they're really taking true value from another area of the business. A good friend of mine was actually promoted someone to management, and he's terrible. We're going to have to actually try and have that conversation where you're going to be down promoted. And I just said, give him the same job title, but just he's 99% technical, and just leave it at that. So every time he goes home and his badge on his name says he's still the same role, he doesn't have to deal with that ego drop. But yeah, it's a difficult space to be in, because the automatic promotion people think is management, and it's not easy. It's almost, in some ways, management is very, very part how you are, and not necessarily what you've been taught, and also things that you've been taught from a management and leadership perspective.
Yeah, aptitude's important, and that you need patience and all that sort of boring shit. One last thing, Alex, just before we go on, because we bang on about this quite a lot, and I know you've heard me go on long rants when we've met up before. AI, using any AI that you're looking to use for your type? Surely there's some use case that's going to be valuable to your type of business.
We are actively looking into. I mean, we're not actually using any apart from sort of the sort of topical use of sort of ChatGPT and stuff like that. But we there's interesting stuff going on in the marketing space with like the capture and those kind of platforms for content creation. But in terms of delivery, we use, in our surveying business, we use a system called Go Report. So the surveyors will go out on an iPad. They will they will capture all the data, and then they'll produce a report on that. That then feeds into our CRM system and our finance Zero, HubSpot Zero, etc. on the tech stack. And there is some things we're looking at and trying to bring AI into those processes in terms of just making us slicker.
Yeah.
But in terms of more project side of things and commercial side of things, not really, to be honest. It's
there's too much risk, isn't there, attached to bad advice and things like that.
In terms of, I think you're employing surveyor because you want their opinion and you want their knowledge and their experience. The way AI is going to be harnessed is really just being able to be much more efficient in the interim. You've got insurance issues, like you say, you've got liability issues with AI, using AI to over leveraging it in terms of what you're putting out there. But I think it's a tool to make your, like, come back to multiples of revenue for surveyor. You could probably push your multiples of revenue surveyor up by using AI, because they're going to be writing your meeting minutes on a CA. They're going to be writing evaluation certificates when you can just ask them for a minute. So it's more like using the tools. And the Microsoft Copilot stuff's interesting. We had a demo of it last week. That's really smart. And I think there's a lot there that can be done in terms of us delivering output of reports and admin tasks.
Yeah.
But in terms of actual out on site and doing the surveying work, I don't think so yet.
Gotcha.
No.
All right, stay tuned. So market data and statistics for anyone out there listening, all the fun shit. Where's construction costs going, Alex? Are we going to be paying more and more into the future? What kind of stuff should we be aware of just going on in the market at the moment?
Well, interestingly, I did a bit of research for this, obviously, but BCIS are predicting build costs are going to go up 15% over the next 5 years. Obviously, where we've seen in the last post-COVID inflation crisis, all of that kind of stuff, is that you've seen a 25 to 30% inflation in construction over the past 2 to 3 years, and we all know that. We're all suffering with that in delivery in our schemes. And
I would arguably say more like 40 to 50% personally, but
yeah. Well, the issue with that 30% increase is it was like 15% in a month, and then steadied out, so it hurt more. Like you're saying, Dorian.
Well, especially if you're in fixed price contracts.
Yeah.
The thing with 15% over 5 years, you can you can factor in a 3% inflation within your costs type of thing.
Yeah. Well, obviously, you can see what happened to Vistry. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys are chatting about that, but Vistry's share price halved in October because they cocked up their build costs across 20 of their sites and has dropped their pre-tax profit down 40%. And that's purely from underestimating their build costs for the inflation period when they first modelled it in 2020 to now, and they're delivering it, and their margins are much skinnier because they are Dorian, much like you, but on a bigger scale. They are forward. They are the big
Correct.
gun in that
Yeah.
forward funded social housing partnership model, aren't they? So
Definitely, and that's what's happened. They literally, because they've come from a house building background. Obviously, they're an amalgamation of acquired businesses, but they blamed it on their house building division, which was an acquisition. But the private house builders, whilst cost inflation comes in, it may not actually affect their GDV because the sale price inflation is also going up, and that's the mentality of every house builder I know within there. When they're looking at their appraisals constantly on when they're reviewing their profitability of the scheme, they're constantly re-asking, where do we think we'll sell these at? Sales director gives them a new report. Sales price has gone up from 300 to 305 per unit. You're like, all right, okay, put that in. QS comes. Bill costs have gone up, but now they're both all right. Problem with our model and Vistry's, that mentality doesn't work because your costs are that and your price is that, and if that goes up, that's it. Really, it's just a bit brutal. Yeah.
Well, what
I mean,
about
it's never
the
going down.
Yeah, it's never going backwards, is it? This is a fucking big problem.
No, that's why we've done some vertical integration to take control of civils, take control of M&E, to try to make our own cost savings through controlling more of the supply chain. Basically, it's the only way to do it.
And what about the if we're going to speak about collapses, what about the is it ISG? Forget the acronym ISG that went down. Do you know anything from your standpoint, Alex? I know we touched on it maybe like a month ago when we met up. But you heard anything more about the fallout of ISG and like where all those, like, was it 2,000 staff that got let go?
yeah, it's still hard to know. I mean, because of the way the subcontractors would have been paid, and the fallout of that is going to be sort of not known for the next kind of quarter or 6 months, because it's going to hit the subcontractors when they have to do their VAT return and all of that kind of stuff,
Bleed its
which is
way
a
out.
couple of months away. Yeah, so I think it's still unknown, but I think it's going to have repercussions. I mean, I think I've seen, and I've been shared in other WhatsApp groups and stuff. There's administrations going on all over the place in construction still, with house builders and
Octagon, was it?
Octagon. Yeah, Octagon. There was another one in Liverpool. I can't remember what they're called, but there's still people hurting that where they are getting pinched in terms of the build costs and rising costs and lack of revenue. So it is tricky, but in terms of like what we're seeing on the ground, the build costs for us, it seems that the new build housing, I know Dorian's probably going to disagree with this, new build housing costs are now pretty steady in terms of material, traditional house building materials, labor costs. You can predict quite well, and it's the first time I can say that in the last 2 years.
I don't
That we are pretty
I don't disagree with you, Alex, really. I think the most of our pain has come from and does come from legacy sites where you still, and a lot of these insolvencies are still the same, where like a job can take 2 years to deliver. So there's a lot of companies right now, as we're speaking, still on schemes they entered into in 2022. That is just the reality of it. And if they entered into 2022, chances are that they based their data off 2021's data, and it's so easy because it's all estimating stage really and viability at the time. It's just I've had meetings directly with clients, and I've told them that our costs have gone up 40%, and they've basically said to me, well, it's contractors' risk. It is what it is.
So just to share from Dorian, you've obviously got a very different business model. We buy disused assets, repurpose them, and sell them on the open market. And even though we push the pain of the fixed price contract onto the contractor, what we're then taking is market risk. So whether we're buying something in 2021, procuring it and delivering it in 2022, 2023, we don't know from 2021 to 2024 where the actual market's going to be. We've had a fucking dreadful market for the last 18 months to sell stock, but before then we had a good sort of 8-month spell. So with our both different varying business models, you get pinched at a different point to how we do from market risk, and we're actually hoping for sort of market stability, and you're almost looking at purely construction stability.
Which just tether back to inflation and markets. But Alex, what would you say then for at the moment the kind of market we're in? Are we in a build time? Is it a good time to be building? Are you confident in that? As you say, 15% for the next 5 years, so they think a 3% annual inflation increase on materials.
Is that inflationary linked?
That's their inflationary linked, build cost index. Their tender price index is saying 20% increase, but obviously it's always slightly ahead of their actual material and industry costs. I think in terms of time to build, I think it is a good time to build. I think on new build, I had just finished my point previously. On new build housing, it seems quite a appealing market from a buildability perspective. On conversion, it's still quite hard to predict costs, a little bit harder, because what we're almost seeing is that build costs on conversion are almost per square meter the same as build costs for new build in a lot of senses, which is weird. Like, to get your head around that, it costs you the same to convert a building into flats than build new houses out the ground. And that's purely down to regulation change from like fire safety, acoustics. And Jack, you can probably shed some light on this, but I think that we are building new build housing at sort of anywhere between 1,600 to 2,000 a metre. And I imagine your build costs at Tame and your conversion schemes aren't far away from that.
Yeah, they're not too far away from that. But we can't in Oxfordshire. We can't build at sort of 2,000 a square meter. We're probably more like 3. So our conversions are up there with like 1,500 to 2,000 a square meter with everything in, including abnormals. But the difference with some. We've actually found the biggest cost difference is like a Tame. We've got a smaller contractor who doesn't have middle management, doesn't have all of it in-house, doesn't have the capabilities to do 50 unit size, whereas our contractor in Abingdon does, and they're way more expensive. They're almost you're paying what you'd pay to build it out of the ground. So with the smaller, cuter schemes, we've actually just costed up our scheme in Marlow, which is 8 flats. And I think we're somewhere down at like 1,200 a square meter for a conversion to 8 luxury flats. So you can be sharper depending on the size of the construction business that you go
pro
for.
rata. That's similar to us, where we fluctuate around the £1,000 a square meter, but obviously we're not having to do it to a Marlow specification. Do you know what I mean? So
Marlow exit is 700 a square foot, so you can warrant it.
Yeah. So in terms of regs changes, then Alex, do you think we're settled now? Do you think they've had their big push this year, or do you think it's going to keep evolving? We're going to see more drastic changes.
Changes. I think there's rumours that the Building Safety Act is being reviewed, and they're going to almost change how what a high risk building definition is, and it's not just going to be about the height of the building; it's going to be about the risk profile, the occupancy type, the site constraints. And there's talk that medium rise buildings 4 to 6 stories will be dragged into that if they meet certain criteria. So that will capture a lot of pain.
Is that 4 to 6? Is that going to be on a meterage as well, or is that just?
I don't. This is speculation, but there's talk that it's not just about the risk, the height of the building. It's about the layout, the fire risk,
which I completely agree with.
The occupancy type, i.e., if it's social housing or something, it's probably going to be higher risk than private open market. So
if they do 4-story, that's going to be an absolute quash for SME developers. There's just going to be like a slither of the market that's just not getting touched and just sat there.
Yeah. So stupid.
I don't know in terms of building regulations. To be honest, I'm not sure if there's anything upcoming that's any changes regular, but obviously every couple of years there's some update. It'd be interesting to see what happens geopolitically with the sustainability stuff, and because it seems like that's taking a bit of a back seat at the moment with the narrative with Labour. So it'd be interesting to see if
Shifted the
that
biodiversity a minute, hasn't it?
Yeah, so it's almost going to be interesting to see if that gets deregulated a little bit, maybe.
I fucking hope so.
Which would again make feasibility much easier on stuff.
Yeah.
Well, there's an issue. There's a genuine issue now, isn't there, of properties, particularly retrofits, being over insulated, and then in the summer you can't fucking cool the things down, and they're sweating and they're getting moldy. And
solar gain.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a huge
I mean,
problem.
I think the biggest problem in that space is industrial buildings and sheds and big offices that their EPCs are. You'd almost have to knock it down and rebuild it to get the EPC where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And then it's nonsensical. And what do? You can't walk into a steel fabrication building and say, right, you've got to fit this out like Heathrow Airport. It's just not needed.
Yeah, it's mental.
Yeah, and I think we've got a scheme at the moment, which is like an 80s, probably similar to what you're doing, Jack, 80s office building, and the requirement to get that you'd almost be impossible to get that to EPCA. It's literally impossible. And it's an 80s office building, full cavity walls, like built like a bunker, and you still couldn't get it to EPCA unless you throw just chucking money at it, which is scary. And that's what's going to kill, like you say, a lot of the retrofit stuff. Yeah,
surely the assessment of EPC has got to be changed first before we can move towards this sustainability factor, because we're going off a gauge that's wrong.
They have been speaking about that. They've been threatening that for a while now. But whether that materialises, I don't know. I think Ed Miliband's floating around in that market, isn't he?
Fucking lunatic. Last thing then. Last thing, Alex. Just because I think we touched on this a bit before here, but everyone is now affected by the new CDM and principal design changes to building control on any scale. Can you just explain for anyone listening, if they're using contractors now and they're using architects and they're going at even a HMO, like a 7 or 8 bed HMO, there's now a new process to follow and new criminal liability, isn't there, actually on the owner and the developer if they are seen to be negligent? Or could you just play a bit of weight to that and explain what the process now needs to be if you're submitting a building control application?
Yeah, so before the Building Safety Act came in, you had to, by law, appoint a principal designer under CDM regulations. Now, with the change of the Building Safety Act, you have to formally appoint a principal designer under the Building Safety Act and CDM regulations. That can be the same person, it can be the same consultant, it can be your architect, or it can be your contractor if the contract is under design and build contract. But it is so important that as client, you have to formally appoint someone as that principal designer, otherwise you become the duty holder as principal designer, and that means you are then liable for any fire safety design in accordance with building regulations for that scheme.
And it's no longer ring fence with corporate protection either, is it? It is now directors, officers, or anyone of a company, which we all are, owning our SPVs and owning our development companies. You are now criminally liable, aren't you, if you don't adhere to these things?
Correct.
Yeah, which is a big change. But I actually think there's an element of positivity in that change, because it should mean if people want to get into development, they've got to take it seriously. They can't just go, yeah, I got a contractor, he's sorting it, but that you need the checks and balances. And to do that, you kind of need a threat that's sort of egregious enough that it makes you go, all right, I need to do this.
To be fair, where it is slightly frustrating is it's moving liability away from building control, which is typically run by the government, onto the people, which I don't necessarily agree with so much.
Yeah,
I think if they want consistent delivery of house renovations in a location, someone in the council needs to be skilled up on that to monitor that. So it's just passing the buck and the work and all of it onto us, basically, which is what they like doing.
Yeah, it should be a shared thing.
Where this is a big issue for me, I find, is if I'm doing 100k house refurb, for me to get all of that wrapped up cleanly and correctly is a fortune. Like it's not, 100k refurb could be re-renovating a house and extending the back wall 3 meters. Like that shouldn't be too technical, and it's probably going to cost best part of, once you spread those liabilities, instructed someone to help with that, $8,000. that's 8% of your contract value. I think it's less of an issue on the bigger stuff because you probably you should have that anyway. Like you should have those people on board. But where I think it is a fucking shit show is, we've actually put this to contractors who have gone, what is that? I'm not signing that.
There's a huge PI issue as well in that market.
Yeah.
So no one can get insurance to be a PD. That's another issue. A lot of architects are excluding it from their PI. Obviously, you've had a load of improved inspectors going into administration or being caught negligent over the last 12 months, which is making the PI market even heavier. So it is like you're right, Jack. There's stuff that's under like £1 million. Your professional fees are heavily outweighed. And I think as an MS, typically we'd say anywhere between 10 to 12% traditionally for professional fees, but now you're looking at sort of 15 to 18% for schemes overall. So it's just
is there a push? I've heard rumours that actually from building control officers appointed by the council as well, that there's a bit of a push to kind of abolish approved inspectors and bring it all under the government sort of jurisdiction on building control. Is that true?
That was flagged in the Grenfell inquiry report that they are concerned that there's a conflict with approved inspectors having a commercial interest in a project, and that it all should be regularised via the local government. So that potentially could rear its head. I think what you're seeing now on a lot of the bigger schemes is that, especially with the Building Safety Act, that the clients will employ a approved inspector to act as a building control advisor or building regulations advisor, as well as having the local authority building control person or whatever that body is.
They work alongside each other.
So they're basically sat there advising you on building regulations.
Interesting. Go on.
It all comes back to talent, doesn't it? I mean, if there's not enough people to do the job, I mean, what are you going to use ChatGPT to be a building control officer?
But the issue is if they go into fucking councils though, and the council becomes the new, like the only source for. I mean, that's going to be fucking carnage because they never get the best talent in the council, and they never because they don't pay them well.
Well,
so
they can. I mean, when we were chatting to John to McDermott last week, I don't think it's necessarily talent. I think it's more funding, and that every government body has got the leakiest fucking bucket that's out there.
Yeah,
it doesn't even have a bottom in it. That is the problem, because when John McDermott was saying, we can't get the teams, I looked it up. There's like 90,000 people in the UK studying town planning. 90,000. That's like more per year that are in the council. So if the career growth, if the funding was right, and they weren't scattering money everywhere in leak, then we would be able to fix this, and it could go into the public sector. But the issue is public sector is just not where.
Yeah,
I mean,
the issue is it shouldn't be in the public sector.
HMRC don't have a problem running a clean operation, so why can't other outfits do it?
I've got to shoot, gents. Sorry, I've got a very important.
Good luck, Dean. Message us later.
Yeah, we'll do. I'll let you know. Good luck, mate. It's great to see you, and thanks for such a riveting conversation this fine early morning. Have a good day. I'll see you soon.
Big love, mate. Good luck. Bye.
My book of secrets.
My book of secrets. Bless him. But yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on a few good points. Is there anything, Alex, that you think we've not touched on? Anything useful for people to hear about, talk about?
Just trying to think what else is going on in the industry. I think in terms of the planning stuff, it's going to be interesting to see how they. I think what's happened with the budget. I mean, without getting this could go down a loophole, but obviously stamp duty increase. There was no help to buy kind of release or launching of a new equity scheme, which is going to get that bottom end of the market moving. But what's going to be interesting is to see where, obviously, with the inheritance tax and the farming stuff, what actually happens with this grey belt planning stuff. Because what they're saying is they're going to release some of the green belt into grey belt, which is previously developed land, which is still classed as green belt. That's going to be the Kickstarter for the house building industry. And I think that unless land availability and planning is sorted, that we're still post planning. it's going to go up and down in terms of what regulation is, what the labour market's saying. But pre-planning is going to be the main, and getting schemes into planning and timescales there is still the major crux that we see in schemes and kill schemes.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be getting any better either. It just seems to get worse and worse at the moment. But we'll fucking see. I mean, what are they? I thought this month, sorry, on a slightly separate note, but still around sort of planning, I thought they were going to be abolishing nutrient neutrality. So I know they tried pushing it through last year, and that's holding up 110,000 homes or even more now. And we deal with it here in Teesside. Do you think they're going to abolish it, or is that just going to stick around?
I think it's sticking around, isn't it? I think it's sticking around. I've heard nothing of that being abolished.
It's a difficult one to abolish because it's not like where they can go, right, we're going to launch another government incentive to support people to buy homes and they have to find a fund for it. This is something that's impacting the environment. So, it's quite a bullish U-turn to then go back on that change. It's more, it's not as commercial. There's a bit of emotion that they've got to deal with to handle that, and anything with any emotion in it, like pulling funding from medical, is really difficult. Yeah.
All right, beautiful. Well, Alex, where can people, if they're listening, where can they find you? And obviously, anyone who is listening who wants to find Alex, don't spam him with bullshit. Only if it's a genuine request. But
in a Wetherspoons in Southampton, I reckon.
Don't tell me what I can build for. Horde.group is our company website. Obviously, all of our services and contact details on there. I'm on Instagram, Alex J Hurn, and LinkedIn, Alex Hurn. So yeah, please reach out.
Beautiful, mate. All right. Thank you for coming on the show, mate. Hopefully an interesting deep dive there. We should definitely do a follow-up at some point in the next few months just to go deeper on regulations and what we think about reform. We had John McDermott on, who's a town planning consultant, last week or the week before, and we were talking about reform.
Week,
I think it was 2 weeks ago. I can't remember, but we were talking about planning reform and like if we could reform it, what would it look like? We could maybe do a follow-up episode on if building regulation got simpler, what would that sort of look like? But yeah, big love anyone listening. Thank you very much. We release these episodes every Thursday at 5:30 a.m. on Spotify and YouTube. Please do subscribe and drop us a comment if you want to request any future topics or conversations that we may have. Then please do drop us a comment on the YouTube channel. Anyway, have a good day. Bye-bye.
Shout
Roundup sound. Ooh, yeah. Real estate deals. We lay